Okay, so today we are diving into some pretty official stuff, an executive order,
Hmm.
all about making the government more efficient. Well, at least that's what the title says.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the real head scratcher here
Yeah.
is they are calling it the DOGE agenda.
It certainly seems like someone in the White House has been spending a little too much time on the internet.
Yeah, DOGE, you heard right.
Huh?
But memes aside, this executive order aims to seriously overhaul the U.S. government's tech and operations, so less much wow and more much work for federal agencies, it seems.
Right.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty, maybe we should take a step back and break down what an executive order even is.
Yeah, an executive order is essentially a direct instruction from the president bypassing Congress but still carrying the weight of law. It's a powerful tool for setting policy and driving action across the government.
So in this case, the president is using this power to shake up the digital side of things, and they're starting by renaming the U.S. Digital Service.
Right.
It's now officially the U.S. DOGE Service, the USDS.
And they're not being subtle about it either. The order explicitly states this renaming is public,
Hmm.
almost like they're trying to generate buzz or maybe appeal to a younger, tech-savvy audience familiar with the whole Doge meme.
It's definitely a bold move, and it's got everyone talking.
Yeah.
But let's dig a little deeper. What is this USDS actually tasked with doing?
Well, the order establishes a temporary organization within the USDS focused specifically on implementing the president's DOGE agenda. It's like a special task force with an 18-month deadline. They're on the clock.
And their time runs out on July 4th, 2026. Is that a coincidence, or are they trying to make a statement with that date?
It's hard to say for sure, but the symbolism is definitely there. Maybe they're aiming to tie government efficiency with American independence, or maybe it's just a way to create urgency. Either way, it adds another layer of intrigue to this whole thing.
Speaking of intrigue, this executive order goes beyond just setting up a new agency. It mandates the creation of DOGE teams in every single federal agency.
Absolutely, these teams will be tasked with modernizing technology and software across the entire government, from the Department of Defense to the National Park Service.
So it's not just a tech initiative, it's a government-wide transformation, and these DOGE teams aren't just made up of techies. Either the order specifies a mix of skills engineers, of course, but also HR specialists, legal experts. It's a pretty diverse group.
That suggests they're taking a holistic approach to modernization. It's not just about upgrading systems. It's about changing processes, training people, and navigating the legal complexities. This DOGE agenda is about more than just lines of code. It's about rethinking how the government operates at a fundamental level.
Okay, so we've got a rebranded agency, a temporary task force, and DOGE teams topping up everywhere.
Yeah.
But what exactly are they doing in all those government agencies?
Their main directive, as outlined in Section 4, is to improve the quality and efficiency of government-wide software, network infrastructure, and IT systems. They're basically tasked with bringing the government's tech into the 21st century.
It sounds like a massive tech upgrade. But the order uses phrases like maximize efficiency and productivity. Are those just buzzwords, or is there real substance behind them?
That's a great question, and to answer it, we have to look at the details. The order goes beyond vague promises of efficiency. It specifically mentions promoting interoperability, which means making sure different agency systems can talk to each other seamlessly.
So no more data silos and information getting lost in the bureaucratic maze.
Exactly. They're also emphasizing data integrity, ensuring the accuracy and reliability of government data, which is crucial for everything from national security to public health. And there's a strong focus on responsible data practices, which connects to the growing concern about data privacy and security in the digital age.
Okay, so they're not just slapping on a fresh coat of paint. They're trying to fundamentally change how data is handled and used within the government.
Right.
But this brings up another interesting point. The order grants the USDS broad access to agency records and systems, even overriding previous rules that might have blocked such access.
That's right, and that's why things start to get a bit controversial. While it's presented as a way to facilitate modernization and ensure data consistency, some are concerned that such broad access could potentially undermine privacy protections.
So is this a necessary trade-off for greater efficiency or a potential overreach? It seems we'll have to wait and see how this plays out.
It's definitely a point worth discussing further, and we haven't even touched on the general provisions section yet.
Ah, yes, the fine print, it always seems a bit boring, but I have a feeling those general provisions might hold some important clues about the DOGE agenda's true scope and limitations.
You're absolutely right. Stay tuned, because things are about to get even more interesting.
Okay, so we've laid out like the basics of this executive order, right? The rebranding, the DOGE teams, the modernization push.
Right,
But what I really want to talk about is what it all means.
right.
What are the potential like ripple effects of this DOGE agenda? It feels like we're on the edge of like a major shift in how the government operates.
It's certainly generating a lot of buzz, both excitement and concern. The potential benefits are pretty clear, right? A more efficient, tech-savvy government that can better serve its citizens.
Hmm.
But any major change like this comes with risks and challenges.
Yeah, let's start with the positives. What's the best case scenario here? What could this DOGE agenda achieve if it's implemented effectively?
Imagine a world where interacting with the government is actually pleasant.
Hmm,
Streamlined processes, faster response times, user-friendly online services that actually work, no more wrestling with clunky websites or getting lost in a maze of bureaucratic red tape.
that sounds lovely.
Right.
But let's be realistic. Every rose has its thorns. What are some of the potential downsides or unintended consequences we should be watching out for?
Well, as we touched on earlier, the broad data access granted to the USDS is a major concern for privacy advocates.
Right.
While the order mentions data protection standards, the specifics are still vague. There's a risk that in the rush to modernize, we might end up sacrificing individual privacy.
That's a worry, especially in this day and age when data breaches and misuse are becoming increasingly common. What kind of safeguards do you think would be necessary to address these concerns?
At the very least, there needs to be complete transparency around how this data will be accessed, used, and protected.
Right.
We need clear guidelines and robust oversight mechanisms to prevent any abuse or overreach. It's not just about protecting individual privacy, it's about maintaining public trust in the government.
Absolutely, because if people lose trust in how their data is being handled, it could undermine the entire DOGE agenda, no matter how good the intentions are. But it's not just about data, right? This whole initiative could have a significant impact on the government workforce as well.
You're right, the order calls for the creation of these specialized DOGE teams, which implies a need for new skills and expertise.
Yeah.
This could lead to opportunities for government employees who are willing to adapt and upskill, but it also raises concerns about potential job displacement for those whose roles become obsolete.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, you have the potential for creating a more tech-savvy and efficient workforce. On the other hand, there's a risk of leaving some employees behind if they aren't given the support and training they need to make this transition.
Precisely, and that's where the government needs to step up. Investing in training and development programs for existing employees will be crucial to ensuring a smooth and equitable transition. Otherwise, the DOGE agenda could exacerbate existing inequalities within the workforce.
It seems like a lot of moving parts: technology, data, workforce, public perception. It's all interconnected. But let's zoom out for a moment beyond the immediate impacts on government operations. What are some of the broader implications of this DOGE agenda? How might it shape the relationship between the government, technology, and citizens in the long run?
That's a fascinating question. This DOGE agenda could signal a fundamental shift in how the U.S. government approaches technology. It's not just about fixing what's broken. It's about embracing technology as a strategic asset.
So it's not just catching up, it's about leading the way.
Potentially, yes, it suggests a move towards a more digital-first government, one that's proactive and innovative in leveraging technology to meet the evolving needs of its citizens. This could lead to new forms of civic engagement, more personalized public services, and potentially even a more transparent and accountable government.
Okay, that sounds promising, but it also opens up a whole new can of worms. How do we ensure equitable access to these digital services? How do we protect against algorithmic bias and ensure that technology is used to empower, not marginalize certain communities?
Those are critical questions, and they highlight the need for a thoughtful and inclusive approach to implementing this D agenda. It can't just be about making things faster and more efficient. It has to be about building a digital government that's fair, accessible, and accountable to all citizens.
And that's going to require ongoing dialogue, collaboration, and a willingness to adapt as we learn more about the impact of these technologies. We can't just set it and forget it.
Exactly. The DOGE agenda is not a quick fix. It's the start of a long and complex journey, one that will require careful navigation and constant reassessment to ensure we're heading in the right direction.
So as this DOGE agenda unfolds, what are some of the key things we should be watching for? What are the red flags that might indicate things are going off track?
One thing to watch is how these DOGE teams are actually implemented.
Yeah.
Are they given the resources and authority they need to drive real change? Are they empowered to challenge the status quo and push back against bureaucratic inertia? Or do they become bogged down in red tape and lose their momentum?
It's easy to create teams on paper, but actually empowering them to make a difference is another story altogether.
Absolutely, and we need to pay attention to how the government addresses those data privacy and security concerns we discussed earlier. Are they putting in place strong safeguards and oversight mechanisms? Are they being transparent with the public about how data is being used?
Because if they try to sweep those concerns under the rug, it could erode public trust and ultimately undermine the entire DOGE agenda.
Exactly, and on the workforce front, we need to see concrete efforts to support and retrain employees who are at risk of being left behind? Are there adequate training programs in place? Are they providing career counseling and job placement assistance?
It's all about ensuring that the benefits of this digital transformation are shared equitably and that no one gets left behind in the process.
Right. The success of the DOGE agenda hinges not just on technological advancements, but also on how it impacts people, both government employees and the citizens they serve.
It's a lot to think about, but that's why we're here, right, to dive deep into the complexities of these issues and help our listeners understand what's at stake. And speaking of understanding, we've got a real treat for our listeners in the next segment. We'll be joined by a leading expert on government technology and innovation who will share their insights on the DOGE agenda and what it means for the future.
It's going to be a fascinating conversation. You won't want to miss it.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been digging into this executive order that's set to shake up the U.S. government, the so-called DOGE agenda, and to help us unpack all the implications, we're joined by a leading expert on government technology and innovation. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So we've talked about like the rebranding of the U.S. Digital Service, the creation of DOGE teams, the focus on modernizing technology and processes, but I'm curious to get your take on like the bigger picture. What does this DOGE agenda signal about the future of government in the digital age?
I think it's a recognition that the government can't afford to lag behind anymore when it comes to technology for too long. We've accepted clunky websites, outdated systems, and bureaucratic processes as like the norm.
Right.
Citizens expect a more seamless and efficient experience, and this order seems like a genuine attempt to meet those expectations.
It feels like there's a growing disconnect between how people interact with technology in their everyday lives and their experiences with government services, like two completely different worlds colliding.
Exactly. People are used to instant gratification, personalized services, user-friendly interfaces. When they encounter the government's often cumbersome and outdated systems, it creates frustration and erodes trust.
Yeah.
This DOGE agenda, at its core, is about closing that gap.
So it's not just about catching up to the private sector. It's about reimagining how government services are delivered in a digital world.
Right.
But it also raises a lot of questions. We've talked about the potential risks around data privacy, job displacement, and the need for strong oversight. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest hurdles the government will need to overcome to actually implement this DOGE agenda effectively?
A biggest challenge, in my opinion, is going to be cultural bureaucracies are notoriously resistant to change.
Yeah.
There will be pushback from entrenched interests who benefit from the status quo, and there will be a learning curve for government employees who are accustomed to doing things a certain way.
It's that whole if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. But in this case, it feels like things are broken or at least in desperate need of an upgrade.
Right, the current system isn't serving anyone well. It's inefficient, it's frustrating, and it's failing to keep pace with the needs of citizens in a rapidly evolving digital landscape. To overcome this inertia, there needs to be a clear and compelling vision for change communicated effectively from the top down.
So it's about leadership, about getting everyone on board with this new direction.
Absolutely. It can't just be a technical fix. It requires a shift in mindset, a willingness to embrace new ways of working, and a commitment to ongoing learning and adaptation. And it has to involve everyone from frontline workers to agency heads.
It sounds like a massive undertaking, but what are the potential rewards if they get it right? What does a truly digital-first government look like, and what could that mean for citizens?
Imagine a government that's proactive rather than reactive, anticipating your needs and providing services seamlessly. A government that uses data responsibly to improve services, personalize experiences, and make informed decisions. A government that's more transparent and accountable, where citizens can easily track progress, provide feedback, and hold their leaders responsible.
That sounds incredibly optimistic, but it also highlights the potential pitfalls. How do we ensure that these digital services are accessible to everyone, regardless of their technical skills or access to technology? How do we prevent algorithmic bias and ensure that data is used to empower, not marginalize, certain communities?
Those are crucial questions, and they highlight the need for a human-centered approach to this digital transformation. It's not enough to simply digitize existing processes. We need to design services with the user in mind, considering accessibility, equity, and inclusivity from the very beginning.
So it's about using technology to amplify the best aspects of government, not just automate the existing ones. And that requires a constant dialogue, a willingness to iterate, and a commitment to addressing these ethical considerations head-on.
Exactly. The DOGE agenda is just the beginning. It's a step in the right direction, but the real work lies in navigating the complexities of implementation, ensuring that technology is used responsibly and ethically to create a government that truly serves the needs of all citizens.
Well said. It's a lot to think about, but it's an exciting challenge and one that has the potential to fundamentally reshape how we interact with our government. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. It's been incredibly illuminating.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of this ambitious DOGE agenda and the many questions it raises about the future of government in a digital world. As always, we encourage you to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay curious. The future is being shaped right now, and it's up to all of us to ensure that it's a future we can all be proud of. Thanks for listening.